The night I flipped the sign, and the town disappeared. Name's Evan Holly. I'm 26. I don't stay anywhere long enough for it to matter. Learned that early. Towns dry up, people move on, jobs vanish. So I keep everything I own in the trunk of a beat-up sedan that smells like old fries and motor oil, and I go where the work is. I don't ask questions if the pay clears. That's how I ended up here, standing behind the counter of Marlowe's roadside diner, 10 miles outside a town that barely shows up on a map. The place looks wrong in a quiet way. Not abandoned, worse, like it's been waiting. Neon sign buzzing half dead, only the word diner lighting up while Marlowe's stays dark. Parking lot cracked like dried skin. Inside, the air smells of burnt coffee and bleach. The kind of clean that's trying to hide something older underneath. They hired me on the spot. No interview, no background check. Manager just slid a time card across the counter and said, "Night shift needs someone who pays attention." I told him I could do that. I meant it. Paying attention is one thing I'm good at. My trainer's name was Cal. Mid-40s, tired eyes, voice like he'd already explained everything too many times. He didn't shake my hand, just leaned on the counter and watched me like I was already late for something important. "You got 3 minutes, he said. 3 minutes for what? For not getting anyone killed. That should have been my cue to walk out. It wasn't. Cal showed me the mop closet first. Inside the door, taped at eye level, was a sheet of yellow paper. Thick black marker, curled edges. Old enough that the ink had soaked deep into the fibers. The rules underlined twice. "You don't memorize these," Cal said. "You live them." Rule 1 sat at the top, bigger than the rest. Rule 1, start the shift right. Cal checked his watch. "We're about to close. You ready?" I nodded, even though my stomach felt tight. "Good. When the last regular leaves, you flip the sign. Open to closed. That's not for business." That's a warning. The bell over the door jingled as a couple shuffled out, paper bag of fries between them. The moment the door shut, the diner felt emptier. Not quiet, empty, like the sound itself stepped back. "Go," Cal said. I moved. Muscle memory kicked in fast, even though it shouldn't have. Sign flipped. Closed clicked into place. My hand shook a little. "Next. Garlic," he said. "All of it? Gone." I grabbed the sauces, dumped them into a bin, shoved it into the walk-in. The air in there felt colder than it should have. When I came back out, Cal was already setting ketchup and mustard bottles on the counter. "Pretzels," he said. I found the basket under the counter. Salted, warm, like they hadn't been sitting there long. I set it dead center on the counter. Cal exhaled. 2 minutes, 53 seconds. Not bad. That's when I noticed the window. The highway beyond the parking lot was gone. Not dark, not foggy, just not there. Where the road should have been was nothing but a flat stretch of gray, like someone erased the distance. No headlights. No horizon. Just the diner, floating at the edge of nowhere. I opened my mouth to ask what the hell I was looking at. Cal grabbed my wrist. "Don't," he said quietly. "First rule after the rules, don't ask questions during the change." Something moved near the soda machine. I turned. Small shapes. Too many limbs. Eyes catching the light as they blinked at me from places they hadn't been a second ago. Cal leaned close and whispered, "Welcome to the real shift." And somewhere under the counter, I heard scratching like hands waiting for permission to work. The binder that knew my name. I didn't sleep after that first night. Not really. Just drifted in and out on the back seat of my car with the diner's neon buzzing behind my eyes. And when I clocked back in the next evening, it felt like I'd never left, like the building had been holding my place. Cal wasn't there this time. Instead, a woman named Ruth nodded at me from the grill, already moving like she'd been mid-shift for hours, and no one explained where Cal had gone. That should have worried me more than it did. By then I'd learned that asking where people went was a bad habit to pick up. I started the routine on instinct, flipped the sign, cleared the forbidden sauces, set the condiments, placed the pretzels. The goblins showed up right on cue, popping into existence on the counter and fryer hood like they'd been waiting just out of sight, and they went to work without a sound. Trash vanished, grease trays scraped clean, drains cleared so fast it made my head spin. That was when Ruth slid something heavy toward me across the counter. A red binder, cracked spine, pages swollen from years of humidity and spills. "Read," she said, like it wasn't a suggestion. I opened it and felt that same pressure I'd felt the night before, that sense of stepping too close to a drop. Every page was a name. Not human names, not really. Some were scratched out, others underlined, a few circled in pen so old it had turned brown. Next to each name were notes written in different handwriting styles. Like a crowd of people had all added their own warnings over the years. Orders, habits, reactions. What calmed them? What didn't? I flipped a page and froze. There it was. My name, Evan Hawley. Written clean and neat, like it had always belonged there. Under it, a single line. If he asks for water, do not answer. My mouth went dry immediately, like my body had read the warning before my brain could catch up. I looked up, ready to ask Ruth what kind of joke this was, and found the diner wasn't empty anymore. A man sat in the corner booth, skin too pale, hands folded just right, eyes fixed on the counter like he was waiting for a test to begin. The binder in my hands felt heavier by the second. He stood without making a sound and walked up to me, close enough that I could smell cold metal and rain on him. "Coffee," he said, voice flat, and I poured it without thinking, hands steady even though my heart was pounding. As he took the cup, his eyes flicked down to the binder, then back to my face, and something like a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You're learning," he said, and left exact change on the counter. When the door closed behind him, the highway outside was still gone, and the red binder felt warm in my hands, like it had been waiting for me to notice it knew me first. The kids who didn't order food. By the third night, the routine stopped feeling strange and started feeling dangerous in a quiet, ordinary way, like driving a road, has a bad curve up ahead, but taking it anyway because it is familiar. I flipped the sign, cleared the sauces, set the bottles, placed the pretzels, and the goblins appeared almost immediately. Already irritated, already watching my hands like they were judging my timing. They worked fast, faster than before, and I realized they were nervous, which somehow made me more nervous than if they'd been calm. The binder stayed open on the counter this time, my page folded just enough that I couldn't pretend it wasn't there, and I kept catching myself glancing at that line about water, trying to remember if I'd ever asked for water in my life. That was when the air in the diner shifted, not colder or warmer, just heavier, like the building had taken a slow breath and decided to hold it. I looked up and saw them standing by the door, 3 of them, close together, shoes scuffed, clothes wrong for the season, faces pale but not empty. They hadn't walked in. One moment the entrance was clear, the next they were there, hands tucked into sleeves, eyes fixed on the floor like they were waiting to be told where to stand. I remembered the rule before anyone had to say it. Children eat for free. I stepped to the counter and waited. They didn't point at the menu. They didn't look at the food. Slowly, one by one, they lifted their arms and pointed at me. All 3. I felt the blood drain from my face as my name in the binder seemed to burn hotter in my mind. "I can't," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. And the moment my voice carried across the diner, something cracked. The lights flickered, the goblins froze mid-motion, and the kids tilted their heads in perfect unison, like birds listening for something underground. I remembered the line. "If he asks for water, do not answer." I hadn't asked, but I'd spoken, and that felt close enough to breaking something important. One of the kids stepped forward, shoe making no sound on the tile, and pointed past me at the soda fountain. I nodded quickly, relief hitting so hard it made me dizzy, and filled 3 cups with cola, ice clattering louder than it should have. I slid them across the counter. They took the cups without touching my hands, their fingers cold enough that the condensation froze in strange patterns. None of them drank. They just held the cups for a moment, then turned and walked away together, vanishing halfway to the door like smoke pulled backward. The diner exhaled. The goblins went back to work like nothing had happened. I stood there shaking, realizing too late that the rule wasn't about food at all, and that whatever those kids wanted, it wasn't hunger that brought them back. The man in room 6, who wasn't looking at the screens, by the 4th night, everyone acted like nothing strange had happened, which somehow made it worse. Ruth worked the grill. The goblins showed up early and cleaned like they were racing an invisible clock, and the red binder stayed open on the counter, its pages shifting slightly on their own whenever the door opened. Near the end of the setup, Ruth nodded toward the narrow hallway behind the fryers and said, almost casually, "Don't forget room 6. I hadn't been told about room 6 before, but my feet moved anyway, carrying a cup of coffee so hot it burned through the lid. The hallway smelled damp and old, like concrete that had never fully dried, and the flickering light above made the shadows stretch in the wrong directions. At the end was a door with a peeling number 6 painted crooked on the front. I knocked once, then opened it. The room was small, packed with monitors stacked in uneven rows, all glowing with live feeds of the diner from angles I didn't recognize. A man sat in the center, facing the screens, hands folded in his lap, back perfectly straight. His skin had the dull color of clay, not pale so much as unfinished, and his clothes looked like they'd been worn every day for years without ever aging. He turned his head just enough to look at me, and his eyes were sharp in a way that didn't match the rest of him. "Coffee," he said, not asking. I set the cup on the desk, and that was when I noticed the screens weren't showing what they should. A front camera showed the parking lot, but instead of cracked asphalt, it displayed a long concrete corridor lined with doors that pulsed faintly red. The kitchen feed showed the fryers, but beneath them, reflected in the steel, something moved that didn't have a shape I could follow. I swallowed and asked, carefully, who he was. He smiled faintly, like the idea amused him. "Name's Jonah," he said. "I watch." He told me he'd been dead a long time, long enough that the rules had started to blur together, and that watching was the only thing he was still good at. I asked him what he was watching for, and his eyes flicked to a screen I couldn't see clearly. "For mistakes," he said, "and for the ones who wait." As I turned to leave, one of the monitors changed, showing the inside of the diner from behind the counter, my own back visible as I stood frozen in the doorway. Jonah's voice followed me out, low and steady. "Don't let them hear your real voice," he said. "They learn fast." When I stepped back into the kitchen, the fryer timer screamed like it had been running dry, even though I knew I'd checked it, and for the first time since I'd started this job, I wondered if the cameras weren't there to protect us at all, but to make sure nothing important escaped. The salt was never meant to keep them out. By the end of the 5th night, my body knew it was close to clock out long before the clock said so, the way animals sense a storm before the sky changes. The diner felt tight, like the walls had leaned in a few inches when no one was looking. And even the goblins were restless, clustering near the sinks instead of spreading out like usual. Ruth reminded me about the salt without meeting my eyes, just slid the heavy bag toward me and said, "Do it slow." Clean lines. I carried it to the front door and knelt, pouring the grains across the threshold, watching how they clung together like they wanted to stay connected. Outside, under the busted streetlight across the road, someone was standing where the highway should have been, tall and still, his outline sharp against the gray, nothing beyond the lot. I didn't need anyone to tell me who it was. Jonah's words echoed in my head as I finished the line and moved to the drive-through window, then the back door by the freezer, sealing each exit the same way. The moment the last line was complete, the pressure in the air shifted, not gone, just redirected, like something had been pushed back into a smaller space. That's when I heard it, a wet sound from beneath the floor, slow and patient, moving from one side of the diner to the other. I froze, realizing the salt lines hadn't blocked the thing outside at all. They'd trapped something inside with us. The lights flickered once, hard, and the red binder slammed shut on the counter by itself. I backed away as the floor near the freezer bulged upward, tiles cracking as if something beneath them had stretched too far. From the hallway, Jonah's voice came through the intercom system, calm but urgent, telling me not to move and not to speak, because it was listening for patterns now. The bulge settled, the sound retreating deeper, and the diner slowly relaxed, like it had swallowed something it didn't want anyone to see. When everything finally went quiet, Ruth let out a breath and told me I could clock out. As I stepped outside, the man under the streetlight was gone, and the highway was back, headlights passing like nothing had ever been wrong. I sat in my car shaking, hands still smelling faintly of salt, and understood the last rule at last. This place wasn't protected by the salt. It was contained by it. And every night I followed the rules, I wasn't keeping monsters out. I was helping keep something far worse from being let loose.